Hello, everybody out there. Welcome. Getting set up here a little bit. My name is Elliot, and I'm the Ielts instructor at Magoosh. I want to welcome everybody to our class today. We have, as we have been doing, we've got all of you Magoosh students in our Zoom call, and we're also sharing this out on YouTube, so that students can look in on what we're doing. All of you folks on YouTube, you can feel free to put questions in the chat and all of that as well. But of course, you Magoosh students today, if you have questions, if you have comments, and you will, I've got some exercises we're all going to do together today. Then you can please put those in the chat today. Finding that unmuting ourselves and having conversations in the live classes gets a little complicated. So let's use the chat feature today. If you have questions, I'm going to be monitoring that. I've got the chat up in front, and if your comment or question relates to what we're talking about directly, I will probably stop and respond to it right then. And if it's something we need to wait until later on to talk about, I'll try to save some time at the end of the lesson today, so that we can go over questions that you have. So let's dive in. I've got to always remember to record this. One moment, let me get this recorded. There we go. Okay, so Magoosh students, you can go in, make sure if you want to watch any part of this video later, you can go to your dashboard and you can see a recording of this class if you go to the dashboard there. So anyway, that is our focus today. We're going to be thinking about speaking, and particularly we're going to be thinking about vocabulary for IELTS speaking. And so we want to think about some things you can do to learn vocabulary, to study vocabulary in a way that is going to be most beneficial for you for the speaking test. I think everything we talk about here, though, today is going to be generally useful for your language development as well. But what I want to do is give you some focus areas, some things that are particularly useful. And then I have a bunch of resources that I'm going to be sharing with you. I'm going to share links to the resources as I talk about them, but then at the end of the lesson, I'm going to have a Google Doc for you that lists all of the resources. I'll share that, all you folks on YouTube, I'll share that out to you as well, so that you can have all the resources in one place. I'll also post that resource list to the recording on your Magoosh dashboard. So if you lose it, you can go back and access that later on as well. Okay, so no need to, if you close out of your tabs or anything and you lose any of the resources as I'm talking about them today, don't worry, I will share that resource for you so that you have everything in one place. Okay, so let's talk about the overview of today's lesson. All right, we've got about an hour here to go through a bunch of stuff. So as I mentioned a moment ago, the key focus today is to look at tips and resources, okay? Lots of resources for you to help you develop your vocabulary, all right? So there's lots of great stuff out there online. Our Magoosh blog, we have a bunch of stuff I'm gonna share, but then there's tons of other stuff as well, great stuff for you. So I wanna give you some of my favorites here today, but this is by no means the complete list of things out there. And when there are items I think you could search for more broadly, I'll let you know that as well. Just lots of great material out there for studying vocabulary. So we're going to focus on, if you looked at the bottom of the PowerPoint there, we're going to focus on 4 areas that I think are really beneficial for focusing your vocabulary study when you're trying to get ready for the IELTS speaking test. So we're going to think about these 4 areas. The first area, focusing on IELTS topic areas, is the first one. It's probably the most straightforward and basic one, but I've got a bunch of stuff to share with you for that. Then we're going to talk about practice fulfilling common functions, linguistic functions that you are likely to encounter on the Ielts speaking test. So that's number 2. We're going to learn a variety of lead-in phrases, or I'm going to give you some resources that give you some what we call lead-in phrases. And then we're going to think about learning what we'll call structural language, okay? Or another term for this that we'll talk about are discourse markers, okay? That's a fancy word that you may have encountered in your English classes, or maybe not. It's okay. It doesn't matter as long as you have these terms in your you know about these terms a little bit. This will help you focus your searches as you're looking for more materials. After you use up what I've given you today, you can continue your search for stuff to help you in these areas if it's a need that you have. All right. So this is where we're going today. I'm going to ask you to participate several times throughout this lesson. In fact, in just a second, we're going to get started with your participation. And then I'm going to be sharing lots of this stuff with you. Okay. So let's get started here with our first topic area. We're thinking about topic areas for IELTS speaking. All right, quickly, I want to take a minute. All right, I want you to help me think a little bit, and I'm going to use my stopwatch. We'll do strict timing here today with our stuff. I would like for you to think about if you had to just take a minute and quickly think about words related to the place where you grew up. How could you describe the town where you grew up or the city where you grew up? What kinds of words could you come up with to just talk about that place? Okay, so for me, I live in a city now. I live near San Francisco, California, but I grew up in a small place. Okay, so I grew up in a farming community. Okay, I was not a farmer, but many of my friends were. I grew up my town. I would come up with a bunch of words related to being small. Okay, it's a tiny place. It's a quiet place. It's a friendly place. I could use lots of adjectives to describe it. What words would you come up to describe your town? So I want you to go ahead in the chat, if you want to, this is optional, come up with words, 1 minute's worth of words describing your town. And then if you've written your words in the chat, go ahead and share them, and I'll take a look at them in just a moment, okay? But let's start here. So 1 minute to think of as many words as you can, adjectives probably, to describe the place you grew up, all right? I'm going to start the clock now. Go ahead and put them in the chat if you feel like it, if you want to. Good. Okay, that was a minute. If you've been typing them, go ahead and hit send. That's good. I'm seeing lots of great stuff in here. I see. Oh my goodness, look at all this. I was born in a small but beautiful alley of a provincial capital city. Nice, Isaac. My hometown is the seaside near the forest. Cold weather. It's cold. I grew up in a devotional city. Okay, I think that might have a religious context there. I grew up in a scenic place. River, palace, museums, capital, hills, garden. Good list here. Mountains, mountainous place. I see up at the top there. Countryside. Oh, Nika, I see your asphalt. Good. I think you grew up in a city. Blocks, bikes, parks, streets, lots of things in that place related to your neighborhood. Some adjectives: charming, inexpensive, small, compact. Zuila, I see your comments there. I was born in Istanbul. I grew up in Istanbul. It's a big city, yes, to say the least. Crowded. I was born in a crowded city. Okay, great stuff here. What we're thinking about here now, the topic area that we just thought about is your hometown. And you're probably aware that things like talking about your hometown, or talking about your family, talking about your school, okay, these topic areas are extremely common, especially on part 1 of the Ielts speaking test. And it's a really, really smart idea to prepare as much language as you can to talk about the place you grew up, to talk about your siblings, your parents, your family, your job, your school. These topic areas are things you can bet are probably going to come up on your speaking test. Now, there's no guarantee you're going to get one topic area or the other, but it's an extremely smart approach to studying vocabulary for the speaking test to develop your language in very specific topic areas. Okay, so we're going to think about that for just a few minutes and think about what you can do within these topic areas. Okay, so as all of you know, one of my things that I talk about in almost every lesson is that I want my students to study vocabulary very, very in a very focused way. Okay, I've shared this particular resource many times. Hold on, I got to get the resource link up on my other browser. One moment. I've shared this particular resource many times, but I want to share it again especially since we're talking about vocabulary. I want to make sure my students are helping themselves the best they can. Sorry, I'm putting links into the chat boxes. Okay, I'm sharing here something that you may have seen before. It is our, on the Magoosh blog, it is our 10-week study schedule for developing your language skills. There's a lot of stuff here, a lot of exercises. We made this because so many of our Magoosh students are studying by themselves, and they have the question, well, how can I not only prepare for Ielts, but also develop my language skills? I've got 2 months or I've got 3 months to study for the test. What can I do to get better? And so there's lots and lots of stuff here. I'm gonna put this, oops, I'm not gonna put it on the screen. There's lots of stuff in this resource for you. Okay, hold on, I wanna share this with you on my screen. 1 second. Should have opened it in a different tab. Here we go. Okay, you should be able to see that now. So there's lots and lots and lots of stuff here in this practice schedule. There's even a suggested way that you could organize your studies over 10 weeks. If you have longer than that, you'll have to make adjustments, or if you have shorter, you could make adjustments. But what I wanted to focus on here is my advice on keeping a vocabulary journal. Okay, keeping track of your vocabulary. It is so important to do if you're studying for the Ielts, even if you only have a couple of weeks, or if you have many months to study. You want to be keeping your vocabulary organized, and you want to be keeping it in a place that you can access it regularly. Okay, yeah, I will allow you to read this advice on your own. We don't need to cover it in depth here in this lesson. But the basic approach with a vocabulary journal that's really important is that you are keeping track of words that you encounter. And related to our discussion today, if you're trying to study for the Ielts speaking test, you're organizing language in ways that will help you remember it. So you can organize your journal, which you can keep in a notebook or on your computer or on your phone, whatever place is going to be best for you. You can keep track of vocabulary related to my family, my hometown, my school, all these topic areas. And by the way, I'll give you a nice idea about topic areas in just a minute, the different areas you could focus on. But you want to keep things organized in this way, and then you want to return to it regularly throughout the week. You don't want to have a 1-hour vocabulary study session on Saturdays and that's it. Instead, you want to go back to your journal maybe every day when you're riding the bus to work, or after dinner. You just have a habit. Okay, for 15 minutes, I'm going to look at my vocabulary journal, and you do that every single day. Okay, it is the habit that you form of looking at your vocabulary journal regularly that is going to make the biggest impact. Okay, and so for today's purposes, what we want to think about is organizing vocabulary into topic areas that are going to be most beneficial for you. Okay, so let's talk about some of those topic areas. What might they be? Well, as promised, I've got a million resources for you here today, and I want to give you some ideas about these topic areas that you can focus on. So let me get another resource on our screen for you to take a look at, and I'll share it in the chat as well. If you haven't seen this already, and by the way, these are two resources that were created by one of our experts, our Ielts experts at Magoosh, and he's actually attending the class today. He's looking in on, his name's David Racine. You might have seen his name around Magoosh students who are in the product. So he put together these resources, and they're really fabulous resources. Let me put a link in the chat for you. Yeah, David says hi to everybody. All right. Oh, there's a long URL. I didn't realize it was so long. Sorry about that. But you can click on there if you want to see what we're looking at. This is a great resources for self-study. And for those of you coming to our conversation clubs on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as many of these questions will look familiar. But I wanted to give you some of the this resource gives you not only sample questions that you might want to practice, you should practice on your own. You can spend a few minutes a couple times a week responding to these questions. I'm assuming you may not have a teacher there, so this is good for self-study kind of stuff. And so you can practice these questions, but one of the key things I want to point out today is that these questions that you see here are organized by some of the most common topic areas, okay? So these are common topic areas for part 1 of the test, right? And so, you know, there's lots of them, friends, family, hometown, school, as we've talked about. It's highly, highly likely that the questions you get in part 1 of the test are going to be related to at least one of these topic areas that you see here. So what you want to do is to make sure that you have a lot of language to talk about these different areas. One of the ways to do that is to practice these questions and take note. If there are questions that are difficult for you to answer because you don't necessarily have the vocabulary, that's a good thing to take note about, and you can start focusing on that area. Maybe it's difficult for you to talk about the weather and the climate in some way. You don't have a lot of language related to that. Okay, so that is an indication that you should develop and build out some of your knowledge about language in these areas, okay? It's a smart way to focus. You know, there are thousands and thousands of words you could study for your vocabulary. You could just go through reading material and take out words you don't know and add that to your journal. But what we're talking about here is being really strategic, saying these are the areas I think I'm going to be tested on, and I want to make sure I'm completely prepared to talk about all of these areas with a lot of detail, okay? So that's the idea that we're thinking about here in general, right? So this resource is a fabulous way to organize your vocabulary study and to practice a lot of these questions that you see here as well, okay? All right, so what we've talked about so far, keeping a vocabulary journal and focusing it on the specific areas, okay? Now, there's more we can think about for IELTS speaking as well. So there's more, it's more than just these topic areas that we need to focus on. As you're aware, I think, IELTS wants to see you trying to, they're going to reward you if you can use less common vocabulary successfully and accurately, Okay, and so you know, there are you ought to be studying words all the time. Okay, you're learning new words from your reading practice, from your listening practice in Magoosh or wherever you're doing it. You're adding new words to your repertoire. But one of the really wonderful ways that you can help improve your scores, particularly related to lexical resource, so your vocabulary score on the speaking test, is to use phrasal verbs and other phrases that are a little less common, considered a little more complex, and Ielts loves to see them, loves to see you use them. So I want to share with you. I want to share with you a resource that will help you there. This is one of the best ones I've seen for, oops. Sorry, out there on YouTube, I forgot to share the last resource. One moment. Oops. Oh, shoot. My URL is too long. I'm going to have to wait on that. All you on YouTube, that last resource with the speaking topic questions, I'm going to have to just share that with the doc that I share later on. The URL was too long for the chat in YouTube. I didn't realize that. Okay, but I'm sharing now a resource for you for studying phrasal verbs. This is one of my favorites, and it's not a complicated document. If you click that one open, you can see that the list there is pretty basic. Okay, there are some phrasal verbs with sentences that describe how to use the word, the phrase, right? They give you a sample sentence there. Actually, this is the exact way that I recommend that you organize your vocabulary journals. And so I like it for that as well. But this is, you can look on, so this is from an academic in the UK. He put together a list of some of the most common and most useful phrasal verbs that you're likely to encounter. And this is a great place to start. Not all phrasal verbs are extremely common or useful, but here's a list of, oh boy, I don't know how many are here. Lots of them. Let me see. Let me scroll down to the bottom. Yeah, we got 150 of them here, of the most common and useful ones for you to use. This is a wonderful place to develop that vocabulary that you can use in these, not only in these topic areas of part one, but anywhere throughout the test, and you can build up your knowledge of some of these phrasal verbs. So I want to share that list for you as an extremely useful resource to develop out your vocabulary journal even more within these topic areas. Raphael, I see your question. For students that are going to study for several weeks, aren't they already covered by conversation clubs? Yeah, we go over a lot of these in conversation clubs. Many of the conversation clubs have questions. Raphael's asking a question about that topic PDF that we have. Yeah, we've used a lot of those questions in conversation club. We're also developing new questions for conversation club that are not necessarily in there. The problem is for conversation club that many of the, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the topic areas don't change a lot. And so, you know, we're covering questions that are in those topic areas that you're likely to see, that are very common on the test. And so it does eventually feel like it's kind of redundant in some way, but we are coming up with new questions outside of those. And actually we have been for a couple of weeks in Conversation Club. We're building out questions all the time. So it's a good question, but yeah, that resource is still useful for practice, and it's still useful to go through and answer questions more than once, right? You study vocabulary a little bit, you answer them again. It's good practice. The repetition is something that is critical for most people for mastering vocabulary. Okay, but good question. Okay, so we've got phrasal verbs there. Let's keep going. Okay, now here's a concept that is becoming popular in the Ielts study world. This concept of mind maps. Mind maps are where you take topic areas like we've talked about, okay, and things like school and family and all those kinds of things. and you organize things in a visual way. Okay, and so this is a term I'm noticing lots and lots of resources out there. If you are if you're studying for a particular area like family, you could Google something like mind maps and family, or mind map and school, or something like that, and it's likely you're going to find some resources related to that. I think mind maps are a really smart way to study for IELTS speaking. And I'm going to say that especially for you students who are, sitting at around the band score 6 level, 6.5, something like that, maybe lower, and you're really trying to get to that next level. So many times, what's preventing students from getting to that next level is not having a vocabulary and grammar and other things too, but a vocabulary that is wide enough, that is flexible enough, that you can talk in depth about a wide variety of issues. Okay, so let's think about what mind maps are here, and we'll talk about. Oh, I've got one piece. I'll skip this last piece, and I'll get back to that in just a second. I want to share with you what a kind of mind map setup looks like. There are different ways that this appears online that you're going to see. And in some of the resources I'm going to share in just a few minutes, there are examples, and even IELTS itself, official IELTS, is putting out mind maps on different topic areas, and you'll see some of those in the resources I share later in the lesson. But here's the idea. If you want to make sure that you're covering the different areas of common topics that you're likely to be asked about, you can organize sheets for yourself, or you can find examples of this online, where there's a variety of language related to the topic area that you're considering. Okay, so for example, we might create a mind map related to your hometown, like we've been talking about all along so far. And so we want to be thinking about, well, what are the various dimensions of my hometown that I might need to talk about? Size, weather, why your hometown is interesting, advantages of living in your hometown, disadvantages, the appearance, seasons, special events. Okay, these are things that you're going to be able to talk about in your first language. But if you are noticing that there are things that are difficult for you to describe especially with a variety of language related to, in this case, your hometown, organizing the language around a mind map is a pretty smart way to organize your thoughts. Okay, so just another suggestion, especially for those of you who are scoring lower in the band scores and you're struggling even in part 1 of the test, you want to start organizing your vocabulary in a way that you can make sure that you can talk about these topic areas from a wide variety of angles, some different perspectives on the topic area that you have. And a mind map is a good thing to build in order to do that. Okay, so we're not going to take the time to fill out this one, but you could imagine, well, okay, so what do I have the English to talk about all of these different areas? And if you don't, then that can be a place where you do some research, you start looking for things, you can maybe even find some examples of useful mind maps online that you could print out for yourself or add to your vocabulary journal, things like that. I think it's a good idea. Okay, in a moment, later in the lesson, I'm going to share a resource that has some mind maps on it. So I won't get into that now, but we can take a look at that in a little bit. Okay. All right, one final thing, one exercise that I want to recommend to all of you as you are thinking about this, because part of the issue is that as you're studying, everybody's vocabulary needs are a little bit different. And one of the things you need to be doing as a student who is self-studying for the test, right? You're largely in control of your own study schedule and your focus areas that you have. You need to be very proactive about taking in vocabulary, noticing areas that keep coming up on your IELTS speaking practice where you don't have necessarily a lot of ability to talk about these particular areas. And so you need to be keeping things like these mind maps or your a simple vocabulary journal as a really basic strategy for yourself as you're trying to make sure that you have the language you need to respond to all of the questions you're likely to see. So that's easier for part one. I've shared all those resources so far about part one, and even part two, the topics there on the resources I've shared so far are pretty straightforward. But one of the things that I would recommend that you do, especially for part three of the test, is to find examples of IELTS speaking interviews online. Okay, you've got Magoosh practice as well. You can do all of this in Magoosh. That's one kind of practice, but there are other places you can go, especially places like YouTube, that have lots of IELTS speaking practice questions and sample interviews and things like that. I want to share in the one from YouTube with all of you, a resource that I find particularly useful. One moment, I gotta find chat room here. I'm going to share. This is the video page from Official IELTS, the Official IELTS channel. And what I like about this page is that they have shared a bunch of sample IELTS interviews, or at least sections of they don't show the whole interview, but they do show segments of interviews. And I think this is a really nice resource for all of you to think about using in addition to whatever practice you're doing so far. And the way that I recommend practicing this is if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the page there, you're going to see those sample interview segments that are there. And I think it's really excellent practice to play those videos, listen to the examiner's question, and then pause the video and you try to respond to the question yourself. Okay, so what would you say to respond? And then you can play the video and listen to what the person said, who's being interviewed for the question. And they give you a score indication for the different responses that are there. And so you can compare your answer to what you hear from the person there. And okay, this is just good IELTS practice, but it relates to vocabulary because especially for those part 3 questions and part 2 questions that are a little bit longer, you should be actively thinking about comparing your vocabulary to the answers that you hear from the people taking the test. And in particular, thinking about, well, if I were answering these questions in my native language, what would I want to say about this? How would I describe this? And you can notice the difference between what you are capable of saying in English and what you would say in your first language. Okay, again, these are tips for self-studying. You got to be resourceful and strategic as you do these things. And this is especially for part 3, this is a good opportunity to notice areas where you're lacking vocabulary and where you should be adding language, phrases, sentences to your vocabulary journal to study. Okay, so just a recommendation. Again, I'm going to share this idea with you in the document that I share at the end of the lesson. But I really think that would be a really smart way to add some additional speaking practice to your schedule and to use it to identify vocabulary words that you need and that you're missing. Okay, so let's see, I see a question in there. I think it's hard to use newly learned words while speaking. Is there a particular tricks method to use new advanced words in conversation? It's a great point. And you don't want to use words that you are only a little bit familiar with during the actual test, okay? If you're in doubt about whether or not the word is correct or is a good one to use, well, you don't have a lot of time to think about it during the test. If the word comes to you and it seems right, I mean, you're probably just going to use it. But I would definitely not go a long way and try to really put in a lot of fancy words in a way that doesn't seem natural. Okay, that actually most of the time doesn't help that much. You want to use words that you feel comfortable with and that you are pretty confident fit the question and the context that you're talking about. So the best way to build your vocabulary so that you can do that kind of thing is by doing exactly these things that we're talking about in this lesson, is by putting in the time to prepare for questions that you are likely to answer and topic areas that you're likely to have to respond to on the test, so that you have a wide range of vocabulary and phrases to use on test day. And the students who do the best are genuinely fluent in those, in the grammar, in the vocabulary, in being able to respond to questions within these topic areas that we talk about. It is difficult to give you a trick to do something quickly here that's going to make a big change for you in a short amount of time. The trick is to regularly, daily, hopefully, or at least regularly each week, study vocabulary and study the right kind of vocabulary. And that's what we're focusing on here today, is thinking about how to give you an idea about the type of vocabulary and the type of practice you can do that's going to help you most. Okay, so that's a really good question, and it's an important one, because you definitely don't want to be using a lot of language that doesn't sound natural. And often students will try to put in really big and fancy words, but they are used incorrectly, and that doesn't really help that much. Okay, those phrasal verbs that I showed you earlier, that's a good place to start. They seem simple, but phrasal verbs are highly rewarded if you can use them accurately on the test. Those are really, the examiners notice that, and that's a good place to start for trying to build out your repertoire of useful words and phrases to use. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to a different area here. We've talked about topic areas, and then I kind of branched off into other things that are related to just vocabulary study generally. We're going to bring back to a focus though. We've got these 4 focus areas for the test that we're thinking about. I want to give you another focus area that is really going to can be impactful on your ability to answer IELTS questions fluently. Okay, we're going to be thinking about functional language here. So let me ask you this question now. We've thought about topic areas. Now I want to ask you a new one. Let's take another minute here, and I want to get some responses from you in the chat. So which words or phrases could you use to introduce an opinion? If your examiner asked you for your opinion on a topic, what kind of words or language could you use to indicate that you're about to give an opinion? Okay, so I gave you an example there. I used an easy one, so I didn't use up all the other fancier ones. In my opinion, blank. You could say something like that. All right, so in the chat, I see some of you have already started this. That's great. I'll give you 1 minute. How many words or phrases could you think of to introduce an opinion? Okay, so go ahead. Anything that comes to mind, even if you see somebody else saying it there, you can still put it in the chat. What ideas do you have? Go ahead. I'll be quiet now. You can put it in there. Seeing some good stuff. You folks on YouTube, feel free to put things in the chat as well. I'm happy to take a look at yours too. Okay. Oh. Good. All right, that was a minute. I'm seeing some good stuff. Let me take a look through here. Wow, lots of ideas. Okay, so I believe, okay, generally speaking, yeah, you could, yeah, generally speaking, you know, and then you could give an opinion after that. Good. According to my knowledge, yeah, according to me would be a really natural way to say that. According to me, or according to what I know, comma, and then continue your thought, or according to my experience, maybe even better. As far as I know, though, that's good. I think, in my opinion, my idea is good. I think, or I personally think, let's see, I believe that, I think that, good, I suppose, and then you give your idea, good, I like that. I can say, yeah, I can say, and then you give your opinion after that, good. As far as I've seen, comma, good. In my view, I like that. In my view, that's a nice one. So that's a nice substitution for in my opinion. That's great. According to me, okay, that's good. From where I stand, nice. Okay, good ideas here, really good. Considering my own background, in my perspective, the way I see it, I like that. That's a good one. Sarat, I like yours. For my money, for my money. That's a pretty good one. That's where you're making a prediction about whether or not something is right, and you have a strong view that you're correct. So it's like you're betting on something. That's a funny one. That's a pretty good one. Good. Okay, good. You get the idea here. What we're thinking about is, if you need to fulfill with your language the function of presenting an opinion, what you've shared with me here is a wide variety of language that you can use to share, to fulfill that function. And Ielts is very much thinking about this when they are building out the Ielts speaking questions that they ask you. They want to see that you can fulfill certain important functions with your language on the test. They're actively trying to seek this out and to see whether or not you can complete these particular functions. Functions and common functions include giving an opinion, okay, comparing two things, okay, telling a story in the past, or making predictions about the future. These are functions of language that they want to see you can fulfill, not only with vocabulary, but also, of course, with your grammar, that you can do it fluently, okay? And to do this well, to fulfill these functions very well, you need to have a wide variety of language in order to do them, right? You don't want to be repeating yourself or using the same phrases throughout your responses. You want to have a variety of ways to say things. So in addition to topic areas that we saw just a moment ago, where you want to build out language related to very specific topics, we also want to focus on functions and being able to complete certain functions with your language, okay? I want to give you a couple of things here. Okay, so basically, yes, I've just put the main point on the screen. It's not one we have to talk about in a lot of depth, okay? It's a very simple idea, but the idea is that, okay, once we know this, wait a minute. Oh, shoot. Oops, got the wrong thing here. It's vocabulary guide. Okay, I put the wrong link in my doc. I'll have to change that. Okay, let's get this open. Okay, so there's David. There's another resource created by our expert, David Racine. And here, so we've got a lot of vocabulary ideas for you from across the exam. Let me put this in the chat for everybody here so you can open it up yourself. One moment. There we go. You can open that on your screen now. So here, oh boy, I gotta open this up. There we go. This is a PDF. I shared with you the link to our blog post. Here, sorry. I put the wrong link in my doc and now it's just taking me all over the place. Let me share the link to the PDF for you. Oh, thank you. students are chipping in to share with me the resource in the chat. Thank you. There we go. Another long PDF URL for you there. Okay, so lots of stuff here. And this is, you Magoosh students, you've possibly seen this before. But what I want to point out here is that that some of the vocabulary that is in this, and by the way, there's lots of great stuff for you, as I mentioned, from across the test, but let me get to the right place here. Some of the vocabulary is organized here by particular functions, and I want to show you what those are. So let me scroll down. All right, we got adverbs, we got all kinds of great stuff. Here we go, Ielts speaking. Okay, so here's the idea. So here, there are some functions here we're thinking about. Asking for information is a function, okay? Confirming you've received information is a function. I'm gonna mute someone out there, sorry about that. I'm just gonna mute you. Okay, we've got different functional language that you can see, giving examples of things, adding ideas or details, cause and effect, okay, comparing, contrasting, summarizing. These are all areas where you should have a little bit of a little variety of language that you can use in order to complete these functions, okay? And so this is particularly a good place to start for that idea. I want to share another resource as well. I'll just put this in the chat. And this is from the official Ielts website. And by the way, Ielts is coming out with lots of study resources, and it's great it's great when you can utilize the free stuff that Ielts puts out for you to use. And I highly recommend taking a look at their website regularly. They've got great stuff to use to study. And here is another example of it. Let me put it in the chat. Thank you, Marco, for the shorter link to that document. There we go. It takes a team to do all of this well. Thank you. I got really thrown off because I had the wrong link in my document there that I was trying to look at. Good. So the Ielts resource I just shared for you is directly focused on this functional language. That's all we have there. And they give you some ideas about a wide variety of areas that include functions that you're likely to see on the test. You need to make sure, I would recommend you this resource from Ielts. You spend time with it, you add absolutely everything here that is not in your current repertoire that you can use comfortably. I think everything here is going to be useful for you to use potentially on the test. And so it's well worth your time to study these different functional areas that Ielts has identified. And you can also use the Magoosh PDF as well as a resource to help you think of some language that might not be included on those. Okay, so those are two functional resources for you to think about the different things you're likely to be asked to do on the test. Okay, all right. So resources, lots of stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of quick tricks and tips for getting a speedy improvement on vocabulary. As you know, and this is something I say often in my classes, this is where it falls on you to develop routines and habits to study vocabulary. And it's going to help you on all parts of the test, not just on the speaking section to learn these things. Much of what we're looking at here is also going to help you potentially on the writing tests as well. Not necessarily this web page from Ielts that I just shared, that is very directly focused on speaking, but I think the Magoosh vocabulary PDF, there's lots of stuff there that's going to help you on a wide variety of sections of the test. Okay, so some additional resources there. All right, a similar topic that we can think about is to learn lead-in phrases, another thing that is really smart to study. So lead-in phrases are things that you can do to jump into answers quickly and to make sure that if you are a person, and by the way, this is lots of people who are going to take the test, but if you are someone who struggles a little bit with coming up with ideas about what to say, or you have a lot of ums and uhs and other pauses that seem to call attention to some of the fluency issues you're having, you can focus on trying to learn a bunch of little words and phrases that are going to give you some time, okay, and give you a few precious seconds, especially in parts 1 and 3 of the test, to think about what to say. So if you look in the vocabulary PDF that I just shared a moment ago, from Magoosh, there are ideas in there for that, okay? But let's, actually, I forgot my little exercise here. I like this. I like to see what ideas you come up with. Let's do our little exercise for this section as well, before I get too much further into sharing about resources related to this. Okay, so very specifically, if you don't know the answer, or you need to think about a question before you jump in and respond. Maybe we don't need a long list of things, but do you have a sentence or a phrase that you could use in order to give yourself a little bit of time to respond to that question? And what would that be? So I put my example there. I would say something like, I haven't thought about that question before. That's an interesting one. Okay, something like that. What would you say? I'll give you a minute here. I'd love to see if you have a phrase that you love to use in order to buy yourself some time. Go ahead. Put it in the chat, and I'll do my strict timing again here. Give you a minute. What would you say in this instance? Okay, see some ideas. Okay, a couple more seconds. If you have 2, go ahead and add another one if you can think of something. These are good. Okay, that was a minute. Let's see what you said. I love this. Okay. Okay, so starting at the top, that's a very interesting question. Let me think about that. Yeah. Oh, that's actually a great question. I think that, I'm trying to avoid the though, actually. Let me think about that. Good. It's an interesting question. That's a good one. I'm afraid I don't have that information to hand. You would say, you would want to say, I don't have that information on hand. That would mean that you don't have it with you. And I'm not sure that you want to use that phrase necessarily, because having information on hand, they're not expecting you to have any information that you brought with you. And that would be the context where you would use that phrase. So I might say something like, I don't have that information on the top of my mind. That could be a good, on the top of my mind means that you're thinking about it here and that you know the answer or the information very quickly, that you can retrieve it quickly from your memory. That's a good question. Oh, that's a good collocation. Don't use the word collocation there. Eduardo, a collocation is a group of words that fit together like a phrase, and it's more of a linguistic term. We wouldn't use collocation in that context. So I would delete that, but you can keep. That's a good question. I haven't thought about that yet. That's a nice phrase. It's the first time I've asked this question. Good. Okay, lots of good stuff. Let me think about that. Okay, well, I'm impressed that I didn't think about that in the past. Okay, that's good. I'm surprised about this question because it was the first time I've heard it. Good, you've got the idea here. All right. So, okay, so that is one form of lead-in phrase that you can use, and it is a good thing to have ready to go. Okay, now of course, you don't want to use this phrase to these kinds of things too much. Your IELTS examiner will know what you're doing. Okay, if you need to think about something, these phrases give you some time to think. They know that is what's going on. Okay, and it's not a problem. If you need to think about an answer to a question, that is a very normal and natural thing that people need to do, even in your own language, when somebody asks you a question. So that's not really necessarily going to give you any kind of penalty if you need to do that once or twice, especially for part 3 of the test. Some of those questions are really unusual, right? So it's not a big issue. What will impact your score is if you have to do this all the time for almost every question, or if your fluency is having issues and you don't have enough to say about the questions, right? And if they think that you are searching for words and language that you don't have, that will become obvious, even if you're using these lead-in phrases successfully. Okay, so it's kind of separate issues there, but you want to have language that you can use in order to give yourself time, in order to jump into questions quickly without long pauses or a lot of ums and uhs and all of those kinds of things. They are looking for those fluency issues, and they can impact your score. So it's good to develop your ability to jump into questions. It's not just about buying time. What we've looked at now is a good example of a very useful kind of lead-in phrase and question, but that's not the only kind of thing you can do, right? You can start by saying things like, well, I would give at least 2 examples of whatever. Okay, and that would be a phrase. If you're asked to respond with an example of something or to give an opinion about something, you want to have language. Some of this is connected to stuff we've talked about before with the functional language, that topic area. That some of those phrases that you would learn to fulfill certain functions are also going to relate to this idea we're talking about of developing language and phrases that are going to help you jump into answering questions fluently and rapidly without long pauses. Okay, so let's think about a couple of these things. First of all, I've got 2 resources to share here. I'll put them in the chat. Okay, so here's number 1. Oh boy. Make sure that's the right one. I've got a shorter URL. I'm not sure why these long ones are the ones that are coming. Okay, there's a shorter one. I just shared that. And for all of you out there on YouTube, I'll share this one as well. Okay, here's a nice resource related to part 3. Of the speaking test. I particularly like that. If you scroll down to the bottom, using linking words and phrases, extending your answers, there's some ideas there of phrases that you can use to jump into responses. Not all of them are related to these lead-in ideas, but there are a number of them there that are really useful. So here's a good resource to use for developing some of those lead-in phrases. And then there's another one that's actually probably going to be even more useful for you in this area. Let me get it for you here. Okay. And this one is a resource on discourse markers that they put together. So this one is good for the topic we're talking about right now, and the next one we're going to talk about in just a moment, because this one has a bunch of different phrases that you can use not only to lead in to answers fluently, but then also in a second, we're going to talk about using structural language and transitioning and using transition words and things like that effectively. Okay, so two resources here to get you started. If you scroll down, the second one I just said, the Discourse Markers one, they've got, this is also related to the functions that we saw a moment ago. Really good resource in addition to the Magoosh PDF and all of these others, with lots of phrases that you can use to build out your ability to, in this case, get into question answers quickly and fluently without a lot of pauses there. Okay, so other stuff too there as well. You're going to have to kind of sort through it. It's not all completely organized by these categories that I'm using myself. But now that you know about those categories, you can kind of think through these different areas and pull out phrases that are new or that are particularly useful for you as you are trying to develop your own word bank in your own journal that you're keeping with phrases that are useful to you personally as you are building things out. Okay, so scroll down through there. I think it's a great place to start in addition to the Magoosh resources we've shared so far. Okay, so as we've talked about here quickly before we get into our last section of the day. So these lead-in phrases give you time to think. They help you introduce ideas in appropriate ways, right? If you're supposed to give a number of reasons for something, you want to have phrases that allow you to jump into providing reasons for the particular thing that you can talk about. And you want to have those things that allow you to introduce that idea appropriately. And you want to sometimes be able to paraphrase accurately. And so this also has a connection to that, although maybe a loose connection. Okay, good. Let's go to the last area. This is the last area for today's lesson, that we can have just a little bit of time to take questions at the end. All right, so the last area to focus on is related to what we're talking about just now. I think there's a close connection to it, but want to add some ideas to the concept here. So we talked about lead-in opportunities, those phrases that help you jump into answers. There's also then phrases and language you can use to help you make transitions and to organize language in your responses. This is especially important for part 2 of the test and your longer answers for part 3. You're going to want to have ways to introduce a variety of ideas and to organize them with language that is appropriate and makes sense. Okay, so thinking about this is our last opportunity to sort of do some group brainstorming here. The question's on the screen. How many words and phrases do you know that would help you introduce a contrasting idea? So if you were talking about something and then you wanted to present some information that was contrasting or disagrees with or goes against something that you just mentioned, what are some different ways you could do that? So I gave an example. Jamie usually finds art museums boring. However, she loved the Museum of Art in San Francisco. Okay, can you think of any other language you could use that would help you to present a contrast like we have on the screen here? Okay, so I'm gonna shut up again. So I'll give you another minute. And words or phrases, longer phrases could work as well. What could you come up with here? Go ahead. Good, I'm seeing some good stuff. Okay, that's a minute. Let me see. I see some good things here. Okay, so I see nevertheless. Sure, that works. Despite, yeah, no, now we get into some things that have some grammar, right? You've got to, if you're going to use despite or even though or although, okay, we've got some grammar rules you would need to be aware of as you study those. We don't have time to go into all of those now, but absolutely, if you know how to use those well, those can introduce contrasts. Yeah, although was another good one. On the other hand, sure. On the other hand is a nice phrase that works. In contrast to X, you could say, yeah, so whatever that thing is, good. In contrast to is a good one. Contrary to this, sure. Nonetheless, sure. Yeah, let me, going back through, though is a good one, yeah. Good. So also, yeah, also, I see that comment in there. I would be careful about using that to present a contrast. Also is going to introduce some additional information that is probably connected to the thing that you just talked about and not contrasting with it. So I'd be careful with also there. In spite of the fact that, yes, I like that. Consequently, not necessarily, that's another one. Consequently is going to introduce a result of something. So something happened, and then as a result of that thing, consequently, the other thing happened. So those two things aren't contrasting. The one thing produced the other kind of idea there. So I don't know that that one is necessarily a good one for a contrast here. All right, but good attempts here. This is what we're focusing on here. Yet, okay, good. Kamal, I see yet. Yeah, you can use yet. Yet with a comma in writing is okay to use, and then you can use that idea in speaking as well. Good, nice, yes. Okay, so the idea here is to learn words and phrases that help you organize information, okay? And to organize it in a way that's logically correct, that presents the idea in the appropriate and logically correct way that you're trying to do, and also helps you to build out ways to organize information so that your examiner can understand all of the points you're trying to make throughout your responses, okay? So a final resource here for you, a really good one. This one was put out by the University of Wisconsin. It's one of my favorites for this. There's lots of stuff online related to this. I like this resource I just shared with all of you in the chat because I like the way that it's organized. I like the way that they have organized information into a couple of different functions that we talked about earlier, right? So all these, like I talked about, all these things are kind of related in a way. This is just a different way of looking at how to organize the information, I guess, as a way to study it in a strategic way, right? But we've got these functions here, and most of the phrases and language you see on the screen there is going to help you to organize and structure your language in a particular way. Some of these are also useful as lead-in phrases like we talked about. And so anyway, there's combinations of things on all of these resources we looked at today. You're going to find a variety of things focused on these different areas that I'm suggesting are the ones to focus on for your vocabulary study, okay? So the point here is that we want to have as many words and phrases and language in our tool belt, we would say, right, in your active vocabulary that you can pull out to achieve these linguistic functions that they're trying to test you on the Ielts speaking test. And here is another resource to build in to your vocabulary study to study all of those types of things, okay? Okay. So again, these are all also, we've seen some places where these are called discourse markers elsewhere on the Ielts resources. They've also come up with that list of discourse markers. There's going to be some redundancy across these different resources that we've shared. But my goal for today was to give you topic areas, focus areas for your study, and to give you at least some of the more high quality resources I'm aware of that are going to help you jump in and organize your preparation for the next couple of weeks or months or whatever it is you have before you need to take the actual test, because it's going to take, for all of you, it's going to take different amounts of practice. You've got different amounts of time that you have before the test, but all of you out there ought to be doing something to develop your vocabulary in these ways, even if the test is coming up at the end of this week. Okay, you can still learn some words and phrases that are going to help you to study for them. Okay, good. So that is what I have for you today. I'm going to share this resource. Let me make sure, hold on. Let me make sure I have the permissions correct for this. I'm going to share a Google Doc with you. Just a moment. And the Google Doc has all of the resources that we've been talking about today in one place, so that you don't have to go keeping tabs open all day. Here, I'm going to share that in the chat. Just a moment. And I see some other questions coming in the chat as well. We should have some time here where I can take a look at those in just a moment. Okay, and all of you on YouTube, I'm putting the document. Oh yeah, the mind maps. Apologies. Yeah, let me take a look at that. Ielts. So Ielts has some mind maps. There was one on the resource. I don't want to flip through all of the resources because I closed out some of my tabs here. Let me find though what I was looking at. Just one moment. Let me take a look. Oh, come on. Let me instead of searching out, I'll put a direct link. I'll put a new on the doc that I just shared with all of you. I'm going to put a, I should have done this to begin. I'm going to put, I'm going to add a line there to the doc that I just shared out, and I'll put some, after the lesson ends, I'll put a couple links to some of the mind map resources that you can find. It's also something, again, if you do a quick Google search, you're gonna find a bunch of different people have put those out. It's something I haven't done here yet for our blog, but I think it's something that we at Magoosh would like to do as well. So we'll think about putting together some mind maps for all of you related to these things. But there's a lot of great stuff out there, and Ielts itself is already producing some of these. So I'll put some links. I'll put some links to that there for you in the doc that I've shared. Yeah. Oh, somebody can't join the doc. Hold on. Maybe I didn't share the permissions correctly. Everybody needs to, oh shoot. Okay, now everybody's gonna send me an email requesting access. Sorry about that. I thought I just shared it. One moment. Get that access correct. Sorry, everybody. My computer is being slow at the moment. Okay. I apologize. Yes, I see why you can't get in. Hold on. Okay. Okay. Here we go. All right, so you'll probably need to refresh your browser, or you can click, I put a new link in there. Here we go. Sorry about that. Uriel, I see that. We need some words or phrases to let people notify that you actually can't access something. Yeah, good. You're probably not going to be tested on that on the Ielts test, but that's useful for your Magoosh classes at least. Good. So you can see, I see lots of people in there now. So I assume everybody's able to get into the document now. And you can see at the bottom, I'm going to add some links to mind maps for you so that you can see some examples of that from the web. Okay, good. So instead of I had some at my fingertips. Actually, they're in some of the resources I shared earlier. But rather than spending time to look for those now, I'll just put those in later. Okay. Good. All right. So any other, we're at time for today. But I can take a minute. Are there, I saw a question directly to me about mock tests for Magoosh. I can take a look at that in just a moment. But related to vocabulary today, or any of the resources, or anything I talked about from earlier in the lesson, do you have any questions for me? Oh yeah, so Marco, thank you. There's one. Okay. There we go. Yeah, Marco, thank you. Let me open that one up. Yes, that's one that I was seeing here. Let's add that one to the doc here. Good. Thank you. Good. Opening that up here on my computer as well. Good. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, if you look even in like, if you do Google search and look for images, there are people who shared images of their mind maps for different things. I think it's great. Just use what's out there. And if some of them will be too easy for you, some of them might be the right amount of challenge. And so, you know, rather than taking time to print out your own stuff there, or create your own, you can print them out, add them to your vocab journal, just put things in there that are useful. A piece of paper is nice. You know, we want to save paper as much as possible as a resource, but it can be nice to have a piece of paper, a physical piece of paper in some way with your journal. You can use a pen, you can circle things, you can X things out. You don't need to focus on all of that kind of stuff. Okay. Yeah, good. Good. Yeah, I see. I'm looking now again at that mind map from IDP Ielts. That's a good one. That's a good place to look. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Now, I see one question here. This was a private comment. Okay, so not a lot of questions coming in about vocab. That's good. I am actually going to sign off here for our YouTube students, YouTubers. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll have another class here on Thursday. If you want to check in, you're welcome to come.
Hi, sir. I have a question. I will type in the chat.
Yes, good. Just a moment, Isaac. Just a second. I've got to make sure I'm ending this thing properly. Okay, and then Isaac. Sure, Aksa, thank you. So one of the classmates, I sent the link that you posted before, but I really didn't post it in the chat. Oh, but Isaac, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about there. Thank you. So Isaac, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to there. I'm not sure what you mean. So I'm not sure how to help you with that one. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, JT. We'll see you all. Come to Conversation Club if you haven't come yet. We'd love to see you there.
Hi, sir. I have tapped the name of the classmate in the chat. That classmate said I sent the link that you posted before, but I really didn't send a link in the chat, so I don't know what's the matter. Can you please ask this classmate?
Oh, well, I'm not sure. Yeah, well, I don't know. All of the links from things I sent for the whole class are in the document that I sent. And so everything should be there. And so if the student is out there, they should have all of the resources just from that document that I shared a minute ago. Okay.
Oh.
I think it's going to be hard to sort it out just on the call right here, I think. Do you remember the student's name who you were trying to send it to?
Wait, sir. Sorry. Sorry, sir. I misunderstand the meaning of the sentence
Okay.
he sent to me. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. That's all right. Don't worry
I
about it.
misunderstand.
Okay.
Sorry.
Don't about it's fine. It's fine. It's good. You were trying to help, and that's great. Good. Okay. I see, Raphael. It may be a stupid question, but can nonverbal language? Oh, that's a very interesting question, Raphael. Yeah, I think so. It shouldn't. Nonverbal communication is going to be related to, most of the time, to at least one. If you are giving off signals that you are not really confident in your ability to answer questions, and that you may not know what to say, I think that stress that is normal to feel could be very noticeable for the examiner. So is it that the nonverbal communication is impacting your score, or is it that the lack of language there? It should be the lack of language. But I will say that even people who are Ielts examiners who are grading people's interviews, it is often a point people make that you should enter the room feeling confident, that you should do what you can to try to sit up straight and look them in the eye, and respond to questions in a way that is, direct, but also, friendly, just, stuff you would do in a comfortable conversation that you would have with anybody who, you're not in an Ielts interview room with at the time. That's really hard to do, but that is a recommendation that's often given. So as much as possible, trying to make watch yourself and make sure that you are sort of sitting up straight, that you're looking in their eye, that you're answering questions like that. I think you don't need to go too extremely far with analyzing your own, cues and posture and things like that. But those are good things to try to remember to do, for sure. Yeah, good question.
Hi, sir. I still have a question, and I have tapped in in the chat. I think that one of the classmates needs a link.
Okay.
And again.
That's fine. I'll share to everyone the link to the doc again. It should be open now. It should be open. That I put the access controls incorrectly, so everybody had trouble. I'm going to have about 50 emails from people who couldn't get into the doc, and that's my fault for not doing that. But now that everybody should be able to get in there, put it public so that everybody can get it. Okay, Uriel, I see your question. I know those resources are for active learning. What kind of resource could be good for passive learning to complement in free time as a hobby instead of, yeah, good question. Well, I think for passive learning, for free time, so there are lots of things I could say for that. I think I'm trying to think of what would be good for speaking in particular. You didn't ask that directly, but since we're focusing on that, I think passive learning often is going to be most likely to happen and most beneficial when you're doing what are considered sort of receptive skills like listening and reading. That's what people tend to do for fun and enjoyment and not just like learning sessions. It can still benefit your speaking and writing, especially if you are just keeping an active mind while you're engaging with those things. It is absolutely a good idea to listen and to material that you enjoy and to read material that you enjoy in English, especially if it's from a source that's going to give you exposure to pretty good language, right? I mean, not all language is equal in relation to IELTS, the IELTS test. So, just reading social media posts, for example, if that's where you see most of your English language in the day, that often isn't very, it's not going to be stuff that is going to be English that's at necessarily a very high level. You might see things like poor punctuation practices and things like that. So, you want to make sure you're reading things that come from good sources, but it doesn't need to be academic, everything. It can be things you might enjoy, podcasts, it can be magazines, newspapers, whatever. Those kinds of things that have been edited a little bit are likely to give you some ideas. We've had some other lessons related to building out vocabulary, but also there was a lesson recently on developing your listening skills and your listening ability generally. And there was a whole section in that lesson where I talked about developing, taking advantage of things you enjoy listening to. And I think if you go back to that lesson, that might be a good place to start for some specific ideas related to your question there. Okay, good. Okay, all right. Thank you, everybody. I've got to take off. As usual, I have morning meetings to get to, but it's great to thank you all for your participation. It's great to see all of you here, and I hope to see a bunch of you for our next lesson later this week. On Thursday, we'll have another one, and tomorrow, of course, is Conversation Club for all of you folks who want to come and practice conversation. If you haven't been to that, I highly recommend you come. I'd love to see you there and give you an opportunity to practice some of these things that we talked about today. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody. Great to see you. See you next time.